day, NAFA members and colleagues. My name is Carol Golden, and I am the Executive Director of the NAFA Limited and Extended Care Planning Center. The LECP Center, NAFA's newest initiative that serves as a comprehensive resource for advisors and insurance professionals. The center is easy to navigate. It's an interactive hub that houses information covering the many options available to plan or to fund long-term or extended care. It's easy to navigate the center and access thought leadership, events, both from NAFA and from the sponsors. There's educational, product, and resource, easy to navigate to get to that information as well. Also, there's networking and, of course, advocacy. The center leverages technology to increase conversations so that we can advocate, educate, and differentiate. I'm pleased to say that today we have Steve Klein and Mike Hedge of the National NAFA Government Relations staff with us. Today we will be asking Steve and Mike to talk about NAFA's political advocacy on the issue of senior financial protection and highlight what NAFA is doing, both at the state and the federal level, on this critical issue. This afternoon, you will hear how financial exploitation of seniors is a significant problem, costing seniors billions annually each year. And what is Congress and the states doing about it? And NAFA's advocacy for its members and their clients will be covered. Steve, Mike, welcome, and thanks for taking time out of your day today for the LECP planning interview. Let's get right at it. Let's start, Steve, with, can you explain why the issue is so critical right now?
Sure, yeah, no problem, Carol, absolutely. And I can say that financial exploitation of seniors, it's already indeed a very, very major problem. In fact, there are some studies that have been done not just by our industry, but also consumer organizations as well. And these studies say that seniors lose approximately between 2.6 and 3 billion annually due to financial exploitation, which, by the way, I think is just a staggering figure. In fact, the AARP thinks this could actually be a little bit worse because a lot of cases of financial exploitation are not reported, particularly in cases of senior that may have some form of cognitive decline. Well, they don't even know that they've been fleeced. And others, you know, if they have lost money, there's the issue of having to come forward and admit that you've lost money. So, believe me, a lot of cases aren't actually reported at all. In fact, there's another study from the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association where they say, and I'm looking here, they estimate about 1 in 5 Americans age 65 and older have been victimized by financial fraud. And the thing for everyone to understand is this problem could actually get a lot worse because we have a senior population that is aging and is actually aging very rapidly and growing quickly. In fact, I've got some data from the Census Bureau which says that the number of Americans over the age of 65 will rise from about 40 million at present to about 72 million by the year 2030. And obviously, you know, many of these seniors have a lot of assets, which of course make them prime targets for financial fraud. And fraud is definitely what we're witnessing. In fact, there's a recent article from the Wall Street Journal which said that U.S. banks reported 24,454 cases of suspected financial exploitation of seniors in 2018. That figure is a 12% increase from last year and more than double the amount that was reported from 5 years ago. And now some people say, well, what kind of fraud are we talking about? Well, unfortunately, there are a lot of common scams that sadly have been very, very successful in stealing a lot of money from seniors. And these tend to be things like mail fraud, fake lottery scams, non-existent investment products. IRS scams are also a big issue too. You know, people call a senior and say, hey, I'm from the IRS and you owe a lot of money in back taxes, but if you pay, you know, everything will be okay. Well, a lot of people don't know that the IRS never calls you, they always send a letter. But again, a lot of people don't know that, and unfortunately scam has been very, very effective. So, but I mean, given the size and the scope of this problem, Congress and the states have moved to try to address this issue by passing some new laws and regulations that are designed to, again, protect seniors from, losing their lifetime of assets and savings. And importantly for advisors and NAIFA members, these new laws will affect the way that you interact with a client when you suspect that financial exploitation may be involved here. So.
Well, it's a very substantial problem and issue, that's for sure. So why don't we start with what Congress has done about this issue and how it affects an advisor or an insurance professional. Mike, can you help us out here?
Yeah, senior financial protection policy has recently gained a lot of traction at the federal level over the past few Congresses. One of the primary reasons that we've actually been successful in pushing federal legislation in Washington is due to the rather contentious nature of politics in the Capitol right now. With the environment creating deadlocks on bigger issues, it's forced both Republicans and Democrats to work together on less contentious issues. After all, at some point, Congress does need to actually pass some form of legislation. This has given Congress the ability to work on bipartisan legislation, such as the senior protection issues, because it's positive for the consumer, positive for the industry, and lacks the more divisive elements you'd expect to see in a lot of policy proposals being floated around the halls of Congress today. Now, back on May 24th of last year, President Trump signed the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act, which includes the legislative language of the original Senior Safe Act. And the House had previously passed this legislation as a standalone bill, but it was combined with a greater bipartisan package in the Senate before it was sent to the president's desk. Now, NAIFA members have advocated on behalf of Senior Safe legislation that would essentially allow them to serve their clients' interests by acting as a first line of protection against financial fraud and abuse. Under the Act, advisors have a mechanism to report suspected fraud to their companies or broker-dealers, which they can then investigate that matter and involve regulators or law enforcement if that's needed. NAIFA became involved with the Senior Safe Act when it was first introduced in the 114th Congress and continued working with bill sponsors throughout the 115th. Now, during this legislative process, NAIFA was active in ensuring the inclusion of insurance in the liability protection that the bill provides, including needed protections for advisors, senior clients, while ensuring that it shields advisors acting in good faith from liability and other potential consequences. The Senior Safe Act is an example of the good that can come out of policy decisions when the insurance industry and lawmakers work together to protect Americans. When you ultimately got from this piece of legislation was an increase in protections for elderly investors and savers, while also protecting financial advisors from frivolous lawsuits, so they can actually go out there, do their jobs, and protect their clients.
And all those are great points, Mike. In fact, one thing I just want to add to what Mike said is that it's also important to note what FINRA has done on the issue. In fact, we do support a somewhat new FINRA regulation that came out probably about several years ago, that really what it does in a nutshell is that this allows a broker-dealer to basically place a temporary hold on a client's transaction or request for a disbursement, again, if the broker-dealer suspects that financial exploitation might be involved. And that's something that we really support. And importantly, I think, like the Senior Safe Act that Mike just talked about, the FINRA rule also again, extends some liability protection for, again, the firm if they want to place that hold. In fact, we actually lobbied FINRA to make sure that the rule covered not just the broker-dealers, but the associated persons to the broker-dealers, and of course, the term associated persons does include NAIFA members. So we were glad to see that happen. Let me, in fact, while I'm at, let me also mention what the states are doing on this issue. Mike obviously covered a lot of what's happening at the federal level. A number of states have actually moved to try to pass some laws and regulations to protect seniors. In fact, about 12 states that we know of, or I should say at least 12 states, have actually passed some model legislation from the North American Securities Administrators Association. And these And these new laws generally call for financial advisors to report suspected fraud on a senior client to state-to-state authorities. In this case, it tends to be the State Securities Commission or Adult Protective Services. And one thing about these new NASA models, and there are two pieces I think that are very, very important to NAFA members. This model would make it mandatory that financial advisors report suspected financial exploitation. NAFA supports a voluntary reporting process, and the reason that we like the voluntary because in a mandatory reporting system, financial advisors, just to make sure that that they're covered under liability protection, they're going to report anything that could be remotely connected with financial exploitation. And as a result, I think a lot of the state securities departments, they're going to be inundated with a lot of reports, many of which are false positives. And so the state's going to spend kind of its limited and scarce resources chasing down a lot of leads that probably aren't connected to financial exploitation at all. But most importantly, I think a lot of these state laws, just like the Senior Safe Act and like the FINRA rule, they do provide some liability protection for financial advisors if they do report. And this is really so important for us too, because what happened is, let's say you're an advisor and a senior client comes in and they want to get into some maybe investment that you think is connected to financial exploitation. Well, in the absence of the liability protection, this really puts advisors in kind of a legal rock and a hard place. Because at that moment, if the advisor does report, well, then you risk violating any privacy or confidentiality agreements that you may have with the client. And then if you don't report and the senior client loses a lot of money, well, then the family can come after you and say, well, you failed to look out for your client and try and protect them by reporting this transaction that may have been kind of suspect. So again, having that liability protection is just really, really important to us. I would just say, really, I think it's just kind of a matter of policy. NAFA generally supports a lot of these measures we're seeing at the federal and the state level to protect seniors from financial fraud. We do really our core principles are we want a voluntary, not mandatory reporting process. We want the firm, not the advisor, to be empowered to temporarily delay a senior client's transaction if it looks like it might be connected with financial exploitation. And again, it's also very, very important to have that legal liability protection in there for advisors, especially advisors that want to, the advisor shouldn't be held liable for really doing the right thing and trying to protect your client from maybe getting into some fraudulent investment that could take all your assets. So.
Wow, these are very, very important, and not only for the advisor, insurance professional, and the senior, but for the entire extended family that is very concerned about having the right thing done for their family member. Yeah, so why don't we move on to, is there anything else that you expect legislators or regulators to be doing on this issue going forward?
I do, yeah, and that's starting with what we might see in the states. I do expect more states to probably through this year and certainly next year to probably take up that model legislation from the state securities commissioners that I mentioned. So I think that's definitely something we're going to see throughout this year and into next. And as far as the state insurance commissioners go, I don't see the NAIC getting into this issue more than they already have, but I could be wrong. We have testified to them, but the NAIC already has a lot of anti-fraud and senior protection measures in place. I think it's definitely an issue on their radar screen, but I don't see them doing anything further. But I could be wrong, but we'll see what happens. So I do think generally for NAFA, this is an issue where we are going to keep being active and engaged on this issue because this problem's not going away. As we said, senior financial protection is going to be an issue we're going to be dealing with, and so it's I think very critical that NAFA, especially as advisors, we want to protect our clients, and we're very much going to be engaged on this issue going forward. So,
Mike, is there anything you'd like to add here?
Yeah, definitely. Senior protection efforts are continuing with the current 116th Congress as well. With the split House of Representatives, bipartisan issues are far and few between, as I mentioned earlier, and senior protection is an area where the work continues to flourish, even in this Congress, especially because of a split House or a split Congress. On the 30th of April of this year, H.R. 1876, the Senior Security Act of 2019, was passed by the House and was then referred to the U.S. Senate Banking Committee for consideration on May 1st. And the Senior Security Act establishes an interdivisional task force at the Securities and Exchange Commission that would investigate continuing issues facing senior investors. The task force will work with government authorities to formulate recommendations to Congress that will address areas where more protections are needed to protect seniors. And what's great about that is it compounds on existing legislation. Under the proposal, the Government Accountability Office will also prepare a report on the economic impact and consequences of elder financial exploitation. The study would further assist legislators in better understanding those challenges that are faced by senior investors because it is unique. And it'll also allow them to better address factors that lead to their exploitation. So it kind of seeks to get at the root of the problem and not just address it with a Band-Aid after the fact. Now, NAIFA is supportive of H.R. 1876 on the basis that such legislation would further strengthen protections of senior investors and would complement recently enacted legislation such as the Senior Safe Act, which I mentioned earlier, by continuing to identify strategies that would protect those Americans that are most vulnerable of all. And this bill shows that Congress recognizes that senior protection isn't a matter of passing one piece of legislation. It's a continuing process to enhance the ability of the law to assist America's seniors. And I think it's one of those things that will continue in perpetuity because you can never fully solve the issue. You can always keep working on it to make it safer for seniors and protect their assets.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm very impressed with the multi-level efforts that the NAIFA government relations staff is putting forth on behalf of the industry. And by the industry, I mean both the advisors and the insurance professionals, as well as the clients. It's frankly quite impressive. Before I let both of you go, is there anything else that either of you would like to add here, such as how to get in touch with you in case they have questions or they need added information? They can go to the lecp.naifa.org/subscribe, and this interview will be posted there. But other than that, would you please offer a way for people to reach out to you if they do have questions or concerns?
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. In fact, people can reach me directly via email. It's skline, spelled Kline, at naifa.org, or you can call me directly. It's 703-770-8187, and happy to answer any questions folks have.
I'm happy to assist anyone that has any questions to come up on the federal level as well. I really enjoy and feel passionately about our work on senior protection issues. You can reach me by email at mhedge@naifa.org. That's mhedge@naifa.org, or call me directly at 703-770-8158.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to thank both of you again for your time, and especially for being so succinct with which has been a great deal of work, a great deal of information, and we really do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carol. We appreciate it.